The courtroom fell silent as 8-year-old Zara Jenkins approached the witness stand, her bright yellow dress a stark contrast to the somber wood paneling surrounding her. Judge Eleanor Simmons leaned forward, her expression softening slightly at the sight of the child whose feet barely touched the floor from the witness chair. "Are you sure you want to do this, young lady?" the judge asked, genuine concern in her voice. Zara's small hands gripped a worn notebook covered in unicorn stickers as she nodded firmly. "My mama didn't do what they said," she replied, her voice clear and unwavering despite the intimidating surroundings, "and I can prove it." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. District Attorney Richard Palmer exchanged skeptical glances with his assistant prosecutor. This was highly irregular, but Judge Simmons had granted special permission after reviewing the child's request. The case against Tiana Jenkins, a single mother charged with fraud after being accused of falsifying documents to secure a small business loan, seemed straightforward to everyone in the Montgomery County Courthouse that morning. Everyone except Zara. The little girl's mother sat at the defense table, her hands trembling slightly as she watched her daughter. Public defender Sarah Martinez had advised against this unconventional witness, but Tiana had insisted on trusting her daughter. "She's always been different," Tiana had whispered during their last consultation. "She sees things others miss." D.A. Palmer approached the witness stand with the practiced ease of someone who'd interrogated hundreds of witnesses. He'd scaled back his usual intimidation tactics out of respect for the child's age, but his skepticism was evident in every line of his body. "Miss Jenkins," he began, his voice condescendingly gentle, "do you understand what perjury is?" Zara's dark eyes met his directly. "It means lying under oath, which is a felony punishable by up to 5 years in prison depending on the jurisdiction and the nature of the case." The courtroom rippled with surprised murmurs. "And I'm not going to do that, sir." Palmer recovered quickly. "Very well. Now, you understand we're here because your mother is accused of falsifying her business records to secure a loan she wasn't qualified for, correct?" "That's what you claim," Zara replied, opening her notebook. "But your evidence is incomplete, and your conclusions are flawed based on documentation I've gathered." Judge Simmons leaned forward, unable to hide her curiosity. "Young lady, are you representing yourself as some kind of legal expert?" Zara shook her head. "No, Your Honor, I'm representing myself as someone who loves her mother and knows how to read carefully." She turned to a page in her notebook that was filled with neat, childish handwriting. "May I present my findings?" The judge nodded, intrigued despite herself. "Proceed, but remember this is a court of law, not a school presentation." Palmer scoffed quietly. "Your Honor, with all due respect, this is highly irregular. The child can't possibly—" "I'd like to direct the court's attention to Exhibit C," Zara interrupted, pointing to the stack of evidence documents. "The prosecution claims my mother falsified her business revenue by inflating numbers, but they've overlooked something important." Martinez, sensing something extraordinary unfolding, quickly retrieved the document. Judge Simmons gestured for her to hand it to Zara. The girl pointed to specific entries with absolute confidence. "The prosecution is looking at the wrong tax year," she stated simply. "If you check the dates carefully, you'll see that these numbers match exactly with my mother's filed tax returns from the previous fiscal year, which was her best year in business before the pandemic." Palmer's assistant hurriedly flipped through their files, his expression changing from dismissive to concerned. The judge called for the court clerk to verify the dates. "Furthermore," Zara continued, her small finger tracing lines on the document, "the loan application specifically asked for best performing year financial data, not current year. My mother followed the instructions exactly as written on the form." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom as the clerk confirmed the dates matched exactly as the child had stated. Palmer's confident demeanor faltered slightly. Even if that's true, there are still discrepancies in the inventory valuations that constitute clear fraud. Zara nodded as though she'd anticipated this argument. I'd like to introduce something into evidence, if that's allowed. She carefully pulled a folder from her backpack. Judge Simmons glanced at both attorneys. This is highly unusual, but I'm inclined to see where this goes. Any objections? Your Honor, Palmer protested. This is completely contrary to proper procedure. We haven't had time to review whatever this child is introducing. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The judge studied Zara carefully. What's in the folder, young lady? The actual small business loan guidelines from the bank's website, printed 3 days before my mom submitted her application, Zara replied. The prosecution is using the updated guidelines that were changed 2 weeks after she applied. I printed both versions and highlighted the differences. Martinez looked stunned as she accepted the folder from Zara and reviewed its contents. Your Honor, she's right. The guidelines were changed after Ms. Jenkins submitted her loan application. The inventory valuation method her client used was perfectly acceptable under the original guidelines. The courtroom erupted in astonished whispers. Judge Simmons banged her gavel. Order! She turned to the prosecution. Mr. Palmer, is this true? Palmer's assistant whispered urgently in his ear as they reviewed their materials. The seasoned prosecutor's face reddened slightly. We may need to verify the timing of the guideline changes, Your Honor. I saved the webpage using the Internet Archive tool, Zara added helpfully. It shows exactly when the bank changed their requirements. I printed those timestamps too. Palmer looked increasingly uncomfortable. Your Honor, even if there's confusion about the guidelines, there's still the matter of the applicant's credit history, which was clearly misrepresented. Zara flipped to another page in her notebook. That's the most important part, actually. My mom's credit report had errors that weren't her fault. I helped her file disputes with all 3 credit bureaus. She pulled out 3 official-looking letters. These are the responses confirming the errors and showing her actual credit score was 682, not the 570 that the prosecution claims she was trying to hide. Martinez quickly examined the letters, her eyes widening. These are legitimate credit bureau correction notices, Your Honor, all dated before Ms. Jenkins submitted her loan application. Judge Simmons turned her full attention to Zara. Young lady, how did you know to look for all this information? The little girl straightened her shoulders. My mom works so hard. Every night after she thinks I'm asleep, I see her at the kitchen table with all her business papers. When they arrested her, I knew something was wrong because my mom always follows rules, so I started reading everything I could find. And where exactly did you learn about banking regulations and credit bureaus? The judge pressed. The library, Zara answered simply. I go there after school while mom's at work. Miss Wilson, the librarian, helped me find books about business and law, and I watched a lot of legal shows on YouTube. Plus, my mom always says that if you read instructions carefully enough, you can figure out almost anything. The sincerity in her voice touched everyone in the courtroom. Even Palmer seemed affected by the child's determination to save her mother. Judge Simmons studied the documents before her, then looked at the prosecution team. Mr. Palmer, in light of this new evidence, do you wish to reconsider the charges? Palmer conferred briefly with his team, clearly thrown off balance by this unexpected turn. Your Honor, we request a brief recess to review these materials properly. Granted. Court will reconvene in 1 hour. The judge banged her gavel, then added, And Ms. Martinez, you might consider offering young Ms. Jenkins an internship in about 10 years. During the recess, the courthouse buzzed with conversation about the remarkable child who had potentially dismantled a prosecutor's case with nothing more than library research and careful reading.
Reporters who had initially ignored the routine fraud case now crowded the hallway, hoping for a glimpse of the young legal prodigy. In a small conference room, Tiana held her daughter tightly. "Zara, how did you do all this? When did you even have time?" Zara looked up at her mother with absolute faith in her eyes.
"You always believe in me. I just believed in you back." She hesitated before adding, "I didn't tell you because I was afraid they might still take you away. I wanted to be sure first." Martinez shook her head in amazement as she organized the documents Zara had provided. "In 15 years of practicing law, I've never seen anything like this." She found inconsistencies that even I missed. When court reconvened, the energy in the room had shifted dramatically. The prosecution table was now covered with open folders and scattered papers. Palmer approached the bench with a distinctly humbled demeanor. "Your Honor, after careful review of the evidence presented by the witness, the state moves to dismiss all charges against Miss Jenkins." His voice carried throughout the now-packed courtroom. "It appears there were significant procedural errors in our investigation, and the defendant's actions were in compliance with the guidelines that were in effect at the time of her application." Judge Simmons nodded. "Motion granted. Miss Jenkins, you are free to go, with the court's apologies for this ordeal." She then looked directly at Zara. "Young lady, would you approach the bench?" Zara walked forward, still clutching her notebook. The judge leaned down slightly. "In my 30 years on the bench, I've never witnessed anything quite like what you did here today. You have a remarkable mind and a beautiful spirit. Your mother must be very proud." "Thank you, Your Honor," Zara replied. "I just did what my mom always tells me to do. Read everything carefully and never give up when you know you're right." The judge smiled. "That's excellent advice. I hope you'll consider a career in law someday. We need minds like yours in our justice system." As Tiana and Zara prepared to leave the courthouse, they were surrounded by reporters and cameras. A local news anchor thrust a microphone toward the little girl. "Zara, people are already calling you a legal prodigy. How does it feel to have saved your mother from wrongful prosecution?" Zara looked uncomfortable with the attention. "I'm not special. I just love my mom. And I knew she wouldn't do anything wrong." Another reporter called out, "Did you have any legal training? How did an 8-year-old learn to investigate like this?" "Books," Zara answered simply, "and YouTube, and asking a lot of questions." The story spread rapidly across social media and news outlets. Within days, #Zara Jenkins and #KidLegalGenius were trending nationwide. Offers for interviews poured in, along with scholarship opportunities and even a book deal proposal. But the most significant call came from Justice Miranda Coleman of the State Supreme Court, who invited Zara and Tiana to her chambers the following week. The distinguished jurist had been so impressed by reports of what happened in Judge Simmons' courtroom that she wanted to meet the extraordinary child personally. In Justice Coleman's elegantly appointed office, Zara sat wide-eyed, taking in the walls of leather-bound books and framed legal diplomas. The justice, a formidable woman in her 60s with silver hair and penetrating eyes, studied Zara with undisguised curiosity. "Your Honor, we're so grateful for this invitation," Tiana began, still overwhelmed by the attention her daughter's courtroom performance had generated. Justice Coleman raised a hand. "Please, this is an informal meeting. Call me Miranda." She focused on Zara. "I've read the transcript of what happened in Judge Simmons' courtroom. I must say, I'm deeply impressed." Zara clutched her ever-present notebook. "Thank you, ma'am." "I understand you prepared all of this research on your own, without any legal training? Is that correct?" Zara nodded. "I just wanted to help my mom. I knew she didn't do anything wrong." The judge's eyes softened. "Sometimes the most brilliant legal minds are driven by something much more powerful than knowledge of statutes and precedents.
They're driven by a fundamental sense of justice. She leaned forward. Zara, do you know what I see when I look at you? The little girl shook her head. I see myself 60 years ago. Justice Coleman gestured to a faded photograph showing a young black girl standing proudly in front of a rural schoolhouse. I grew up in a small town where people like us weren't expected to understand the law, let alone shape it. But like you, I had a mother who believed in me and a passion for reading that opened doors. Tiana squeezed Zara's shoulder, visibly moved by the justice's words.
I'd like to propose something, Justice Coleman continued. We have a special judicial mentorship program for exceptional students. It's typically for high schoolers, but I believe we could make an exception in your case. Zara's eyes widened. You want to be my mentor? If you're interested, we would meet once a month. I could guide your reading, answer questions, perhaps even arrange for you to observe some court proceedings. The justice's expression grew serious. But I want to be clear. This isn't about pushing you into law before you're ready. Childhood is precious, and you should enjoy it. This would simply be nurturing a natural talent at its own pace. Tiana looked concerned. Your Honor, Miranda, I'm honored, truly. But Zara's just a little girl. All this attention has been overwhelming. Justice Coleman nodded. I understand completely. The offer remains open whenever you feel she's ready. She turned back to Zara. In the meantime, I have a gift for you. The justice retrieved a beautifully bound book from her desk. This is an illustrated children's guide to the Constitution. I co-authored it to help young people understand their rights and our legal system. I think you might enjoy it. Zara accepted the book reverently. Thank you. I'll read it tonight. I have no doubt you will, the justice smiled, and perhaps someday you'll write your own. As they left the justice's chambers, Tiana noticed her daughter was unusually quiet. What's on your mind, sweetheart? Was that too much? Zara shook her head. Mom, do you think I could really be a judge someday? Like Justice Coleman or Judge Simmons? Tiana knelt down to meet her daughter's eyes. Zara Jenkins, you can be anything you set your brilliant mind to. You've already proven that. But remember, you don't have to decide your whole future today. You're allowed to be 8 years old. Later that evening, as Tiana prepared dinner, she found Zara already halfway through Justice Coleman's book, making careful notes in her trusty notebook. Zara, she called softly, come set the table, please. Your brain needs food, not just knowledge. As they sat down to eat, Tiana noticed a letter Zara had placed beside her plate. What's this, sweetheart? It's from Miss Wilson at the library. I want to thank her for helping me with all those legal books, and I made a list of other books I want to read next. Tiana smiled, both proud and slightly overwhelmed by her daughter's determination. You know, most kids your age are reading Harry Potter, not legal textbooks. I read Harry Potter too, Zara replied earnestly, but those books are about fighting for what is right when grown-ups won't listen. That's kind of what I did, isn't it? The wisdom in her daughter's observation left Tiana speechless for a moment. Yes, I suppose it is. The following Monday, when Zara returned to school, she found herself suddenly famous. Teachers who had previously seen her as simply a quiet, studious child now looked at her with new appreciation. Classmates who had never paid her much attention suddenly wanted to sit with her at lunch. Is it true you were on TV? One boy asked excitedly. Did you really beat a real lawyer in court? Questioned another. Zara, uncomfortable with the attention, shrugged. I just showed them some papers they didn't read carefully enough. Her teacher, Miss Ramirez, had prepared a special moment for the morning assembly. Students, we have someone very special in our school community. Zara Jenkins, from Ms. Ramirez's 3rd grade class, recently did something extraordinary. Despite Zara's embarrassment, Ms. Ramirez recounted the courthouse story, emphasizing the importance of reading carefully,
asking questions, and standing up for truth. These are values we try to teach all of you. Zara put them into practice in a way that changed her family's life. The principal stepped forward with a certificate. Zara, we're creating a new award at Montgomery Elementary, the Jenkins Award for Exceptional Research, and you're our first recipient. As the children applauded, Zara whispered to Miss Ramirez, "But I was just trying to help my mom."
Sometimes, the teacher whispered back, the most important lessons we learn come from the heart, not from textbooks. That afternoon, as Zara waited for her mother after school, a classmate named Darius approached her hesitantly. "Zara, my dad got arrested last week. They say he stole something, but he didn't. Do you think... could you help us too?" The question caught her off guard. "I'm not a real lawyer, Darius." "But you know how to find things out," he persisted. "You know how to read the hard stuff." Before Zara could respond, Tiana arrived to pick her up. Seeing her daughter's troubled expression, she asked, "Everything okay, sweetheart?" On the drive home, Zara explained Darius's request. "Mom, I can't help everyone who gets in trouble. I'm just a kid." Tiana considered this carefully. "You're right. You can't and shouldn't try to be everyone's lawyer. But maybe there's another way to help." That evening, they called Martinez, who had become something of a family friend since the trial. The public defender listened to Zara's dilemma and suggested a solution. 2 weeks later, Zara stood nervously before a group of parents and children gathered in the community center. Behind her, a projector displayed the words, "Know Your Rights, a workshop for kids and families." "Hi, everyone," she began, her voice initially shaky but growing stronger. "I'm Zara, and this is my mom, Tiana, and this is Miss Martinez, who's a real lawyer." She gestured to the two women beside her. "We're going to talk about some important things today, like how to read official papers carefully, where to find information when you need help, and what to do if someone in your family has trouble with the law." As the workshop progressed, Zara shared her simple but powerful methods, using the library, finding reliable websites, keeping organized notes, and never being afraid to ask questions. Martinez added professional legal advice, while Tiana spoke about supporting children's curiosity and critical thinking. The community response was overwhelming. What began as a one-time workshop evolved into a monthly program, eventually expanding to 3 different community centers across the city. Local attorneys volunteered their time, impressed by Zara's initiative. By the end of the school year, Zara's story had inspired a pilot program in the county school district focused on practical civic education and legal literacy for elementary students. The curriculum, designed with input from educators and legal professionals, emphasized critical reading, research skills, and basic understanding of citizens' rights and responsibilities. Justice Coleman kept her promise, meeting with Zara monthly for informal mentoring sessions. Rather than pushing her toward an early legal career, the justice focused on nurturing her natural curiosity and love of learning. "The law will always be here when you're ready," she told Zara during one of their meetings. "Right now, your job is to explore, question, and grow in all directions." On the anniversary of the courthouse incident, a local newspaper ran a feature story on Zara's journey. The headline read, "1 year later, how an 8-year-old legal prodigy is changing her community." The article detailed not only the dramatic courtroom scene, but also the ripple effects, the workshop program, the school curriculum changes, and the dozens of families who had found help through resources Zara had helped compile. Tiana saved a copy of the newspaper in a special scrapbook she'd been keeping. That evening, as she tucked Zara into bed, she asked, "Are you happy with everything that's happened this year, sweetheart?" Zara thought for a moment, her expression serious beyond her years. "I'm happy you're not in trouble anymore, and I'm happy other kids are learning stuff that might help their families too." "But," Tiana prompted, sensing there was more, "but
Sometimes I miss just being regular Zara, the one who could read her books at recess without everyone watching. Tiana smoothed her daughter's hair gently. You'll always be my regular, extraordinary Zara, no matter what else happens. She hesitated before adding, You don't have to keep doing the workshops if they're too much. You've already done more than most adults ever accomplish. Zara shook her head. I want to keep helping, but maybe could we make sure I still have days to just be a kid? To read fun books and play at the park without thinking about legal stuff? Absolutely, Tiana promised, kissing her forehead. In fact, I think that's the most important case you'll ever work on, the case for your own childhood.
As Zara drifted off to sleep, Tiana sat watching her daughter. This remarkable child who had stood up in a courtroom full of adults and changed not just their own lives, but the lives of so many others in their community. The power of a child's love for her mother had created ripples of justice that continued to spread outward, not because Zara was a prodigy or a genius, but because she had combined three simple, powerful forces: unwavering love, relentless curiosity, and the courage to speak truth even when no one expected her to know it. In the glow of the nightlight, Tiana whispered a promise to her sleeping daughter. You saved me, Zara. Now I'll make sure you get to be exactly who you need to be, whether that's a future Supreme Court justice or just a little girl who loves to read. The choice will always be yours. 6 months had passed since Zara's courtroom triumph, and life had settled into a new rhythm for the Jenkins family. The morning light streamed through the kitchen windows as Tiana prepared breakfast, watching her daughter meticulously organize her backpack for school. Beside her textbooks and lunchbox sat the worn unicorn notebook, now accompanied by a sleek tablet, a gift from Justice Coleman for Zara's 9th birthday. Don't forget, we have the workshop at the community center after school today, Tiana reminded her, sliding a plate of blueberry pancakes across the counter. Zara nodded, checking her calendar app with the seriousness of a corporate executive. I finished my presentation last night. It's about how kids can help their parents understand official letters. Tiana smiled, still amazed by her daughter's dedication. What had begun as one child's desperate attempt to save her mother had evolved into something much larger. The monthly Kids' Rights workshops now regularly drew dozens of families from across the county, with Zara as the surprising young centerpiece. Miss Martinez called yesterday, Tiana mentioned, sitting down with her own breakfast. She said a law professor from State University wants to observe our workshop. Apparently, they're developing a curriculum based on your research methods. Zara looked up, fork paused midway to her mouth. My methods? I just read stuff carefully. That's exactly it, sweetheart. You showed that sometimes the simplest approaches are the most powerful. Tiana reached across to squeeze her daughter's hand. But remember our agreement. School comes first, then fun, then workshops. You promised Justice Coleman you'd maintain balance. The mention of the justice made Zara sit up straighter. Their monthly mentoring sessions had become a highlight in her life. Afternoons spent in the dignified chambers discussing everything from constitutional amendments to Zara's favorite fantasy novels. The justice had been true to her word, nurturing Zara's natural talents without pushing her toward premature specialization. Mom, Zara said suddenly, her expression serious. Darius said his dad's appeal is next week. Do you think you'll be okay? Darius Williams' father had become something of a test case for their community. After Zara had mentioned his situation to Martinez, the public defender had taken a closer look at his case and found significant evidentiary issues. The appeal represented hope not just for one family, but for many watching from the sidelines. Miss Martinez is doing everything she can, Tiana answered honestly, and the work you've done helping Darius understand what's happening has made a real difference for him. This was another unexpected outcome of Zara's courthouse moment. She had become a bridge between complex legal proceedings and the children affected by them,
translating adult language into terms kids could grasp. Local social workers had started referring young clients to her workshops, recognizing the unique value of peer-to-peer explanation. The kitchen television murmured in the background, the morning news providing ambient noise until a familiar phrase caught Tiana's attention. Known as the Jenkins effect in legal education circles, state legislatures will vote today on the proposed funding for expanded civics education inspired by the remarkable case of Zara Jenkins, who at just 8 years old successfully— Tiana quickly switched off the TV, noticing Zara's shoulders tense at the mention of her name.
The publicity had been the hardest part of their journey. The interviews, the articles, the occasional stranger approaching them in the grocery store. While Tiana carefully filtered most media requests, the story had taken on a life of its own. "Just eat your breakfast, honey," she said gently. "School bus will be here in 15 minutes." At Montgomery Elementary, Zara had gradually returned to something resembling normal childhood. The initial celebrity had faded, allowing her to once again be just another third grader, albeit one with an unusual after-school activity. Ms. Ramirez had been instrumental in this transition, treating Zara with the same expectations as her classmates while quietly accommodating her community commitments. As Zara boarded the school bus that morning, Tiana checked her own schedule on her phone. The small business consulting firm she had finally launched, using a properly approved loan, had 3 client meetings today. The irony wasn't lost on her that the very accusations that had nearly destroyed her had ultimately led to her professional success. Several local banks had approached her after the case, offering favorable terms for legitimate business expansion. The courthouse drama had exposed not just one instance of prosecutorial overreach, but a pattern affecting many small business owners in communities of color. The subsequent investigations had resulted in significant procedural reforms in the county's economic development programs. That afternoon, the community center buzzed with activity as families gathered for the monthly workshop. Professor Elaine Mercer from State University sat in the back, taking notes as Zara confidently addressed the room. "Official letters can be really scary," she explained, standing beside a projector displaying a complex government form. "Especially when they have a bunch of weird words and numbers. But here's the secret. They're written by regular people, and regular people make mistakes." The children listened attentively as Zara broke down her methodical approach to deciphering official documents. First, circle every date. Then, underline words you don't know and look them up. Finally, check if the rules they're talking about actually exist or if they've been changed. Martinez, seated nearby, smiled at the elegant simplicity. What law schools taught in semester-long courses, this child had distilled to basic principles anyone could follow. Darius Williams raised his hand. "What if you can't find the rules they're talking about?" "Great question," Zara responded. "That happens a lot. Sometimes they don't want you to find the rules easily. That's when you need to ask for help from the library or a legal aid office." In the back row, Professor Mercer leaned toward Tiana. "She's remarkable. The pedagogical approach is intuitive yet sophisticated." Tiana nodded, a complex mix of pride and protectiveness washing over her. She's also 9 years old and likes unicorns and space exploration. Sometimes people forget that part. After the presentation, as children and parents broke into small discussion groups, Justice Coleman made a surprise appearance. The distinguished jurist rarely attended the public workshops, preferring to keep her mentorship of Zara private, but today she moved through the room with purposeful dignity. "Ms. Jenkins," she greeted Tiana warmly, "I hope you don't mind the intrusion. I thought it important to be here today." Before Tiana could inquire why, the community center doors opened to admit a television crew and several officials in formal attire. Mayor Richardson, a woman who had built her recent campaign around community justice reform, approached with an outstretched hand. "Ms. Jenkins, it's an honor. And young Zara, the inspiration behind today's announcement." Zara looked questioningly at her mother, uncomfortable with the sudden attention. Tiana moved protectively closer. "What announcement would that be, Mayor?" "The City Council has unanimously approved funding for the Jenkins Family Legal Literacy Initiative, a program that will expand these workshops to every community center and school in our district." The room erupted in applause, but Tiana felt Zara tense beside her. This was exactly the kind of public spotlight they had been carefully avoiding. Justice Coleman stepped smoothly into the moment. "Perhaps we might discuss the details privately before any public announcements? The Jenkins family values their privacy, as I'm sure you can appreciate." The subtle redirection from the respected jurist was enough to make the mayor reconsider her media-focused approach. Of course. Perhaps we could step into the office." As the officials moved toward a side room, Tiana knelt beside Zara. "You don't have to do this if you don't want to, sweetheart. This is becoming bigger than we expected." Zara's expression was thoughtful beyond her years. "Will it help more kids like Darius?" "Probably, yes." "Then I think we should listen to what they want to do." "But," she hesitated, "can we make sure it's not all about me? Can it be about the ideas instead?" Tiana hugged her daughter, marveling at her wisdom. "I'll make sure of it." The meeting that followed established the framework for a program that would transform how legal literacy was taught throughout the county. Mayor Richardson had secured significant funding, motivated partly by political calculation, but also by genuine belief in the initiative's value. Justice Coleman, with her extensive influence in legal circles, ensured the program maintained academic integrity, while Professor Mercer contributed educational expertise. Martinez provided the critical connection to real-world legal aid needs, and Tiana, drawing on her business background, insisted on measurable outcomes and sustainable implementation. "This can't be a one-time political photo opportunity," she stated firmly. "It needs to become part of how our community functions." Throughout the discussion, Zara remained mostly quiet, listening intently. When finally asked for her input, her request was simple. "Can we make sure the materials are written so kids can actually understand them? Not just simplified grown-up words, but actually how kids think." This seemingly straightforward suggestion prompted a complete reevaluation of the proposed materials, with Professor Mercer noting that most child-friendly legal resources were still fundamentally designed by adults, for adults. "What if," Justice Coleman suggested, "we established a children's advisory board to review all materials before publication, with Zara as the founding chair, but including diverse representation from across the district?" The idea resonated immediately. Rather than making Zara the reluctant face of the program, it positioned her as the initiator of a larger youth movement, one that would continue as she eventually aged out of her current role. As the meeting concluded, Mayor Richardson couldn't resist asking one final question. "Zara, with everything you've accomplished already, have you thought about what you want to be when you grow up? A judge, perhaps, or a district attorney?" The adults in the room leaned forward unconsciously, awaiting the prodigy's response. Zara considered the question seriously. "Last month, I wanted to be an astronaut. This month, I'm thinking maybe a librarian because Ms. Wilson at the library helped me so much." She shrugged. "Mom says I don't have to decide yet. I'm still collecting data." The simple, childlike answer broke the tension in the room, reminding everyone that despite her extraordinary capabilities, Zara remained a child with the normal developmental journey ahead of her. As the officials departed, Justice Coleman lingered behind, waiting until the media had packed up their equipment. "Tiana, there's another matter I wanted to discuss with you. The state Supreme Court is reviewing a case next month with significant similarities to your situation. The justices have expressed interest in having Zara's methods included in the amicus briefs." Tiana frowned. "They want Zara to testify before the Supreme Court? That seems excessive." "No, nothing so formal," the justice clarified. "Rather, they're interested in the documented methodology, the approach to cross-referencing guidelines and regulations that exposed the flaws in your case. It could establish important precedent for similar cases." Later that evening, as Tiana tucked Zara into bed, she broached the subject gently. "How would you feel about Justice Coleman's team writing up your research methods for the state Supreme Court? Your name wouldn't be mentioned specifically." Zara yawned, already half asleep. "That would be good. Then maybe other moms won't get in trouble like you did." "That's right, sweetheart."
"Mom?" Zara's voice was drowsy but insistent. Remember when you got arrested and I was so scared? Tiana's heart constricted at the memory. I remember. I think that's why I need to keep helping with the workshops. Because being scared is the worst feeling, and if I can help other kids not feel that way? She trailed off, her eyes closing. I understand, Tiana whispered, kissing her daughter's forehead. Sweet dreams, my brilliant girl. The following week brought an unexpected development. Darius burst into the school lunchroom, racing directly to Zara's table with tears streaming down his face. "They're letting him go!" he exclaimed, drawing confused looks from other children. "My dad! The judge said there wasn't enough evidence. He's coming home tomorrow!" The news spread quickly through the school, where several children had parents in similar legal circumstances. By afternoon dismissal, Zara found herself surrounded by classmates asking if she could help with their family situations too. Miss Ramirez intervened, gently dispersing the crowd. "Zara isn't a lawyer, children, but if your families want to attend the community workshops, they're welcome to bring their questions there." As the excited children departed, the teacher placed a hand on Zara's shoulder. "Are you okay with all this attention?" Zara nodded slowly. "I think so. It feels different from the TV people. These are just kids who are scared, like I was." That weekend, the Williams family hosted a small celebration for Mr. Williams' return. Their modest apartment overflowed with neighbors, family members, and several families from the legal literacy workshops. Darius proudly introduced Zara to everyone as the person who showed us how to help Dad. Mr. Williams, still adjusting to freedom after 6 months of wrongful incarceration, knelt to meet Zara at eye level. "Young lady, I don't know how to thank you, not just for what you did for my family, but for teaching my son that he has a voice in this system." "It wasn't really me," Zara explained earnestly. "It was Miss Martinez who did the legal stuff." Martinez, overhearing, shook her head. "I had dismissed Mr. Williams's case as unwinnable until you pushed us to look deeper. Sometimes it takes a fresh perspective to see what experienced eyes miss." As the party continued, Tiana observed her daughter moving comfortably among the guests, no longer overwhelmed by attention, but accepting it as a natural consequence of her choices. Something had shifted. Zara was finding her own balance between the extraordinary circumstances thrust upon her and her fundamental need to simply be a child. The Jenkins Family Legal Literacy Initiative officially launched the following month with a modest ceremony at the Central Library. True to Tiana's insistence, the focus remained on the program rather than on Zara personally. The mayor still managed to include references to the remarkable young mind that inspired us all, but these were balanced by substantive explanations of how the initiative would function. The Children's Advisory Board, with representatives ranging from ages 8 to 16, had already begun reviewing materials and providing invaluable feedback. Their first project, translating the county's Juvenile Justice Handbook into truly child-accessible language, had revealed dozens of procedural gaps that authorities were now working to address. As summer approached, bringing the school year to a close, Zara received an invitation that left both her and Tiana speechless. The governor's office requested her presence at the state capitol for the signing of the Educational Access and Judicial Transparency Act, legislation directly inspired by her case. "This is different," Tiana acknowledged, studying the formal invitation. "This isn't local media or community recognition. This would put you on the state stage." Zara sat with her tablet, researching the proposed legislation. "Mom, this law would make all court procedures and requirements available in simple language. And it says schools have to teach kids about their legal rights starting in elementary school." She looked up, her expression serious. "I think we should go." The state capitol building was imposing with its marble columns and historical grandeur. Zara, dressed in a new blue dress for the occasion, held tightly to Tiana's hand as they were escorted through security and into the governor's ceremonial office. Governor Eliza Santiago, the state's first Latina governor, greeted them warmly.
Miss Jenkins, Zara, it's an honor to meet you both. Your story has had a profound impact on how we're approaching legal education in our state. The signing ceremony included several legislators, education officials, and representatives from civil rights organizations. As cameras flashed and the governor prepared to sign the bill, she invited Zara to stand beside her at the desk. This legislation, Governor Santiago announced to the assembled press, represents a fundamental shift in how we approach justice and education. For too long, we've maintained systems that are incomprehensible to the very citizens they're meant to serve. Today, inspired by the extraordinary insight of one child, we begin to change that reality. As the governor signed with a flourish, Zara stood tall beside her, understanding that she was witnessing something important, not because of her personal recognition, but because ideas that had begun in her unicorn notebook were now becoming enshrined in state law. That evening, in their hotel room, Zara sat cross-legged on the bed, while Tiana ordered room service. The day's events had been exhausting but exhilarating. "Mom," Zara said suddenly, "remember when you were arrested and everyone thought you were guilty, even though you kept saying you followed the rules?" Tiana nodded, the memory still painful despite the vindication that had followed. "I've been thinking about that a lot. About how grown-ups make systems so complicated that even other grown-ups can't understand them. And then they punish people for making mistakes." Zara's brow furrowed in concentration. "That doesn't seem fair." "No, it doesn't," Tiana agreed, sitting beside her daughter. "That's why what happened today matters, because you helped people see that problem clearly." Zara was quiet for a moment. "I think maybe I do know what I want to be when I grow up." "Oh, not an astronaut librarian anymore?" Tiana teased gently. "I still might do that too," Zara grinned, "but I think I want to keep making complicated things simple for people who need help. Not just legal stuff, but all the hard things that scare people." Tiana wrapped an arm around her daughter's shoulders. "That sounds like a perfect mission for you, whatever title it eventually comes with." As they looked out the hotel window at the illuminated Capitol building, Tiana reflected on their extraordinary journey. What had begun as a desperate child's attempt to save her mother had catalyzed changes neither of them could have imagined. Not because Zara was a prodigy, though her intelligence was undeniable, but because she had approached an intimidating system with the clarity and directness that only a child could bring. In that simplicity lay a profound truth that was now rippling outward, changing lives and systems that had seemed immovable. The most powerful force wasn't legal genius. It was love made manifest through determination and the courage to question what others accepted without challenge. "We should get some sleep," Tiana said softly. "Tomorrow we're just tourists. No interviews, no ceremonies. Just ice cream and the Science Museum, as promised." Zara's eyes lit up. "Can we see the space exhibit? They have an actual moon rock." "Absolutely," Tiana laughed. "Astronaut librarians need to research all their options." As Zara drifted toward sleep, Tiana watched her daughter's peaceful expression and whispered a silent prayer of gratitude. Their lives had been transformed, certainly, but the most precious gift was that through it all, Zara remained fundamentally herself, curious, compassionate, and still very much a child, despite the extraordinary circumstances that had thrust her into the spotlight. And that, Tiana knew, was the true victory. Not the legal vindication or the policy changes, but the preservation of childhood wonder in the face of adult complexity. Whatever path Zara ultimately chose, she would walk it both with the wisdom of her unusual experiences and the authenticity of her undiminished spirit. The autumn leaves painted the courthouse steps in shades of amber and gold as Zara climbed them, clutching her tablet and a small stack of notes. Now 10 years old, she had grown 2 inches over the summer and carried herself with a quiet confidence that belied her youth. Today marked an important milestone, her first official appearance as a youth advocate before Judge Eleanor Simmons, the same judge who had witnessed her courtroom debut 2 years earlier.
Remember, you're just making a statement during the public comment period, Tiana reminded her, straightening Zara's navy blazer. 3 minutes, no legal arguments, just your personal perspective. Zara nodded, rehearsing her talking points mentally. The juvenile justice reform hearing had drawn advocates from across the state, most of them seasoned attorneys and policy experts. She was the only child scheduled to speak. Inside the courtroom, the familiar wood paneling and formal atmosphere brought back powerful memories. Judge Simmons caught Zara's eye as they entered and gave her a subtle nod of recognition. In the 2 years since their first meeting, the judge had become a quiet supporter of the Jenkins family initiative, occasionally attending workshops and providing guidance on court procedures. Martinez waved from the gallery, where she sat with several families they'd helped through the program. Among them was Darius and his father, who had become vocal advocates for reform after his wrongful incarceration. Mr. Williams had recently been hired as the initiative's first community liaison, using his painful experience to help others navigate the system. As the hearing progressed, Zara listened intently to the technical arguments and policy recommendations. Her tablet filled with notes and questions as she absorbed the complex proposals. This wasn't just academic interest anymore. Over the past 2 years, she had seen firsthand how court procedures directly affected children's lives. When Judge Simmons finally called her name, the courtroom fell silent. Many of the assembled officials and lawyers had heard of the Jenkins girl, but had never seen her in person. Some expressions registered skepticism, others curiosity. Zara approached the podium, which had been lowered slightly to accommodate her height. She placed her notes carefully before her and looked directly at Judge Simmons. "Thank you, Your Honor. My name is Zara Jenkins. I'm 10 years old, and I'm here today because I think children should have a voice in systems that affect their lives." Her voice, though young, carried clearly throughout the chamber. There was none of the trembling nervousness that might be expected from a child addressing a courtroom full of legal professionals. 2 years ago, I stood in this courthouse to help my mother when she was wrongfully accused of fraud. Since then, I've met 47 children whose parents are involved in our legal system. These children don't understand what's happening to their families because no one explains it to them in words they can understand. She paused, turning a page in her notes with deliberate precision. Our initiative has developed child-friendly explanations of court procedures, but these materials aren't officially recognized by the courts. Children have a right to understand what's happening to their families. This isn't just about being kind, it's about justice. Throughout the gallery, heads nodded in agreement. Judge Simmons leaned forward, her interest evident. "I'd like to propose 3 specific additions to the juvenile justice reforms being discussed today," Zara continued, her voice growing more confident. "First, mandatory child-appropriate explanations of all family court proceedings. Second, a youth advocate program in every courthouse. And third, simplified forms that both children and parents can understand without needing a lawyer to translate." The simplicity and practicality of these suggestions created a ripple of whispered conversation among the assembled experts. These changes would cost very little, but would help thousands of children feel less scared and confused. As someone who was one of those scared children, I can tell you that understanding what's happening makes all the difference in the world. Zara looked directly at the judge. "Thank you for listening to me today." As she returned to her seat, the courtroom remained silent for a moment before erupting in applause, a breach of formal protocol that Judge Simmons allowed to continue briefly before gently restoring order. "Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. Your perspective is precisely why these hearings include public comment. Sometimes those closest to the problem see solutions that experts overlook."
A representative from the State Children's Services Department asked if she would be willing to review their family materials and suggest improvements. "What did I tell you?" Martinez whispered to Tiana as they observed the interactions. "She has a gift for making the complex seem obvious. These people have been debating policy for months, and in 3 minutes she cut through to exactly what matters." Tiana watched her daughter handle the attention with grace, neither overwhelmed nor inflated by the recognition.
The past 2 years had taught Zara how to navigate public interest while maintaining her essential childhood. The media frenzy had eventually subsided, allowing their lives to find a new equilibrium, one where Zara's extraordinary capabilities existed alongside normal childhood experiences. That balance had been hard-won. There had been difficult moments. The educational consultant who wanted to accelerate Zara through school grades, the publisher pushing for a children's book deal, the documentary filmmaker who followed them for weeks. Tiana had protected her daughter from exploitation while still nurturing her natural abilities and desire to help others. Justice Coleman had been invaluable during this process. Her monthly mentoring sessions with Zara had evolved to include discussions about boundaries, self-care, and the importance of childhood joy alongside intellectual development. The distinguished jurist had become something of an honorary grandmother figure, celebrating Zara's ordinary achievements with the same enthusiasm as her extraordinary ones. As they left the courthouse, Darius caught up with them on the steps, his face alight with excitement. "Zara, my teacher wants our whole class to visit your next workshop. She says what you're doing should be part of every school's curriculum." The suggestion prompted an immediate brainstorming session between the children. By the time they reached the parking lot, they had sketched out an entire school presentation format, complete with role-playing exercises and mock hearings. Tiana observed their enthusiasm with a mixture of pride and amazement. What continued to surprise her most wasn't Zara's intellectual capabilities, but her emotional intelligence, her intuitive understanding of how to connect with other children around complex topics, making the intimidating accessible without condescension. Later that evening, as they prepared dinner together, Tiana noticed Zara was unusually quiet. "Penny for your thoughts, sweetheart?" Zara carefully sliced cucumbers for the salad, her movements precise. "Mom, do you remember Mr. Palmer, the prosecutor from your case?" The question caught Tiana off guard. Richard Palmer had been reassigned after their case, his aggressive prosecution tactics subjected to internal review. They hadn't heard his name mentioned in months. "Of course. What made you think of him?" "I saw him today at the courthouse. He was in a different hearing room." Zara continued slicing methodically. "He looked sad." Tiana chose her words carefully. "Sometimes people who make mistakes have a hard time moving forward from them." Zara placed the knife down and looked up at her mother. "Do you think people can change if they're given a second chance? Really change?" The question carried weight beyond her years. Tiana recognized it as one of the fundamental questions of justice itself: punishment versus rehabilitation, accountability versus redemption. "I believe most people can, yes, if they truly understand what they did wrong and want to do better." Tiana studied her daughter's thoughtful expression. "Are you thinking something specific about Mr. Palmer?" "Maybe he could help with our initiative," Zara suggested quietly. "He knows all the ways the system can be used unfairly. That knowledge could help fix those problems." The suggestion revealed a level of compassion that Tiana found both surprising and moving. While she had focused on putting the painful episode behind them, Zara was contemplating how to transform it into something constructive, even to the point of involving the very person who had caused their suffering. "That's a remarkable perspective, Zara. Not many people would think about giving someone who hurt them a chance to make amends." Justice Coleman says true justice isn't about punishment, it's about restoration. Zara resumed her food preparation. Maybe Mr. Palmer needs to restore something too. The insight stayed with Tiana through dinner and into the evening. When Zara had gone to bed, she called Martinez to discuss the idea. The public defender was initially skeptical, but gradually warmed to the concept. "It's unorthodox," Martinez admitted, "but rehabilitation should apply to everyone in the system, including those who enforce it." Palmer was a symptom of bigger problems: cutting corners, making assumptions, prioritizing conviction rates over justice. If he's genuinely interested in reform. 2 weeks later, Richard Palmer sat nervously in the community center office, his once commanding presence diminished by the events of the past 2 years. The internal investigation had not resulted in termination, but had relegated him to reviewing minor infractions, a significant demotion for someone who had once handled high-profile cases. Tiana studied him carefully across the desk. "I want to be clear, Mr. Palmer. This isn't about forgiveness or pretending what happened to my family wasn't serious. It's about whether your experience can be channeled toward preventing similar injustices." Palmer nodded, his expression somber. "I've spent 2 years replaying that case in my mind. How quickly I made assumptions, how easily I dismissed evidence that contradicted my narrative." He met her gaze directly. "I was wrong. Completely wrong. And not just in your case, in dozens of others I've since reviewed. And you believe you can help reform the system you were part of? I know where the gaps are. I know the unwritten procedures that lead to discriminatory outcomes. I know which training is effective and which is just for show." He hesitated. "What I didn't know, what I didn't want to know, was the human cost. Seeing your daughter in that courtroom changed something fundamental in my understanding of justice." Their conversation continued for over an hour, evolving from cautious exploration to concrete planning. By the end, they had outlined a potential role for Palmer as a consultant to the initiative, focusing specifically on prosecutor training and accountability measures. As Palmer prepared to leave, he asked, hesitantly, "Will Zara be involved in this project? I'd understand if you prefer to keep her separate from my participation." Tiana considered the question carefully. "That will be her decision. She's the one who suggested reaching out to you in the first place." His surprise was evident. "She suggested after what I put your family through?" "My daughter sees possibilities where others see only problems, Mr. Palmer. It's her greatest gift." Tiana opened the door. "We'll be in touch about next steps." The following Saturday marked the largest workshop yet for the Jenkins Family Initiative. The community center's main hall had been transformed with interactive stations where children and parents could practice navigating different aspects of the legal system. At one table, volunteers helped families create personalized binders for organizing official documents. At another, a simplified mock courtroom allowed children to role-play different scenarios. Zara moved confidently between stations, answering questions and demonstrating techniques. Her peer training program had expanded to include 15 student advocates from schools across the district, each specializing in different aspects of the legal system. Midway through the workshop, Justice Coleman arrived with several distinguished guests, 2 state Supreme Court justices, and the newly appointed head of the State Bar Association's Access to Justice Committee. Their presence created a stir among the volunteers, but the children continued their activities, blissfully unaware of the judicial firepower observing them. Justice Coleman pulled Tiana aside. "The program we discussed has received preliminary approval. The court is prepared to establish official youth advocate positions in 5 pilot courthouses, with Zara's curriculum as the training foundation." Tiana struggled to absorb the magnitude of this development. "Are you saying the state judiciary is adopting our program officially?" "With some adaptations, yes. The justices were particularly impressed with the peer education component." Justice Coleman smiled. "They're calling it the Jenkins Protocol, official, child-centered procedures for all family and juvenile court matters." Across the room, Zara was demonstrating to a group of children how to decode a court summons, breaking down the formal language into understandable concepts. Her audience listened intently, asking questions and taking notes in colorful notebooks provided by the program. "She has no idea how far her influence has spread, does she?"
Justice Coleman observed. "We've tried to protect her for most of it," Tiana acknowledged. "She knows her work matters, but we've been careful not to burden her with adult expectations." Later that afternoon, as the workshop concluded, Zara gathered her peer advocates for their regular debriefing session.
The young team had developed their own evaluation system, identifying what worked well and what needed improvement for future workshops. "I think we need more examples for immigration cases," suggested Miguel, a 12-year-old whose parents had navigated the complex asylum process. "Lots of kids at my school have families dealing with those forms." "And we should add something about protective orders," added Keisha, whose mother had recently left an abusive relationship. "Those are really confusing for kids." Zara noted their suggestions carefully in her tablet. The peer program had evolved far beyond her original vision, with each young advocate bringing personal experiences that enriched the curriculum. What had begun as one child's desperate attempt to save her mother had become a collaborative movement, owned not just by Zara, but by dozens of children whose lives had been touched by the legal system. As the children continued their discussion, Palmer arrived quietly at the back of the room. He had been scheduled to meet with Tiana to discuss the prosecutor training program, but the sight of the children's earnest planning session stopped him in his tracks. The contrast between this scene and the courtroom drama of 2 years earlier could not have been more stark. Zara noticed him first, pausing mid-sentence. The other children, sensing her attention shift, turned to see what had caught her eye. Tiana moved to intervene, concerned about how Zara might react to seeing the man who had nearly destroyed their family. But before she could reach them, Zara approached Palmer herself. "Mr. Palmer," she said, her voice neither friendly nor hostile, simply matter-of-fact. "Mom said you might be helping with our prosecutor training program." Palmer seemed momentarily at a loss for words, clearly unprepared for the directness of this encounter. "Yes, if that's something you're comfortable with." Zara considered him carefully. "Do you know why I suggested Mom talk to you?" "I've wondered that myself," he admitted. "Because prosecutors need to understand what happens to families when they make mistakes." Her voice remained calm, but carried absolute conviction. "And you know about that now." The simplicity and power of her reasoning left Palmer visibly moved. "Yes, I do. And I'd like to help make sure it happens less often, if I can." Zara nodded, accepting his response. "You can observe our workshops, but please don't interrupt the children's discussions. They need to feel safe to ask questions." With that, she returned to her peer group, resuming their planning session as if the momentous interaction had not occurred. Tiana approached Palmer, who remained rooted to the spot, clearly processing the exchange. "She's remarkable," he said quietly. "She is, and she's also a 10-year-old who likes soccer and has trouble with fractions. Both things are equally true and equally important to remember." This balance between Zara's extraordinary capabilities and her fundamental right to normal childhood had become the guiding principle of their lives. Every opportunity was evaluated against this standard. Would it nurture her natural gifts without burdening her with adult responsibilities? Would it allow her to help others while still experiencing the joy and discovery of childhood? As the community center emptied, Zara and Tiana gathered their materials. Justice Coleman approached with her distinguished colleagues who had been observing the workshop with evident fascination. "Zara, I'd like to introduce Justice Ramirez and Justice Chen from our state Supreme Court. They've been very interested in your program." Zara shook their hands with the easy confidence she had developed through countless such introductions. "It's an honor to meet you. Did you have any questions about our workshops?" Justice Chen smiled. "Many, but primarily I wondered if you might consider bringing this program to the Capitol for a special presentation to our law clerks and staff attorneys. The perspective you and your peers bring would be invaluable to those drafting opinions that affect children's lives." The invitation represented yet another expansion of influence, from local community to state policy, from grassroots initiative to institutional integration. Tiana watched carefully for signs of pressure or overwhelm in her daughter's response. Zara considered the request thoughtfully. "Could we bring some of our peer advocates too? They all have different experiences with the courts." "Absolutely," Justice Chen agreed. "The more diverse perspectives, the better." "Then I think that would be really good," Zara nodded decisively. But we need to schedule around soccer season. Our team is in the semifinals next month. The simple prioritization of a childhood activity alongside a Supreme Court engagement brought smiles to the adults' faces. It was precisely this balance that made Zara's insight so valuable. Her ability to move between the world of legal complexity and the direct, unfiltered perspective of childhood. As they drove home that evening, the sunset painting the sky in brilliant orange and pink, Zara gazed out the window thoughtfully. "Mom, do you think we're actually changing things? Like, for real?" Tiana considered the question seriously. "I think we're creating ripples that are spreading further than we can see. The children you've helped will remember that someone made the scary parts of the legal system understandable for them. The officials who've listened to you are thinking differently about how they communicate with families. But the big problems, like innocent people getting in trouble or kids being separated from their parents, those are still happening." "They are," Tiana acknowledged, never one to shield her daughter from difficult truths. "Systems change slowly, and there will always be new challenges. But that doesn't mean our work isn't valuable." Zara was quiet for a moment, processing this. "Justice Coleman says that justice isn't a destination, it's a journey we keep taking together." "That's a wise way to think about it," Tiana agreed. "And you've helped more people join that journey, people who might have felt too confused or scared to participate before." As they pulled into their driveway, Zara gathered her backpack and tablet. "I've been thinking about something new for our program. What if we made a special workshop just for kids whose parents are in jail or prison? They have different questions than other kids." Even after 2 years of witnessing her daughter's compassionate intelligence, Tiana found herself continually moved by Zara's ability to identify unmet needs. "That's a wonderful idea. Why don't you start making notes about what that workshop might include, and we can discuss it with the team next week?" Inside, as Zara changed into pajamas and prepared for bed, Tiana reflected on their journey. What had begun in fear and desperation had transformed into a movement touching hundreds of lives. Not because Zara was a legal prodigy, though her intelligence was remarkable, but because she approached complex systems with the clarity and directness that only a child could bring. In that simplicity lay a profound truth that continued to ripple outward. Justice belonged not just to those with power and knowledge, but to everyone, including the smallest and most vulnerable members of society. And sometimes, as their story had proven, those small voices could catalyze the most meaningful change. As she tucked Zara into bed, Tiana whispered, "I'm so proud of who you are, sweetheart. Not just what you've accomplished, but the person you're becoming." Zara yawned, already drifting toward sleep. "Tomorrow I'm going to start designing that new workshop. And maybe we could invite Mr. Palmer to help explain what prosecutors are supposed to do versus what they sometimes actually do." Even on the edge of sleep, her mind continued to build bridges between opposing worlds, finding pathways to understanding where others saw only walls. This, Tiana knew, was Zara's true gift to the world. Not legal genius, but the profound ability to create connection across boundaries that adults had long accepted as impassable. As her daughter slept, Tiana sent a quick message to Martinez and Justice Coleman about Zara's new workshop concept. Their responses came quickly, both enthusiastic about the potential impact of addressing this specific need. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to balance extraordinary work with ordinary childhood. But tonight, watching her daughter's peaceful sleep, Tiana felt a profound gratitude for the journey that had brought them here, from the courthouse drama that had nearly destroyed their family to the movement for change that had risen from those ashes.
The insight prompted murmurs of approval from the gallery. Chief Justice Williams nodded slowly, his typically stern expression softening slightly. "An astute observation, Miss Jenkins. The court appreciates your testimony and the considerable work that has gone into developing this protocol." As Zara returned to her seat beside Tiana, Justice Coleman, who had recused herself from voting on the measure due to her mentorship role,
gave her a subtle thumbs up. Their monthly sessions had evolved over the years, focusing less on legal technicalities and more on leadership development, ethical considerations, and maintaining personal well-being amid public responsibilities. Following Zara's testimony, Richard Palmer approached the podium. The former prosecutor's participation in the initiative had raised eyebrows initially, but over the past year, he had become one of its most effective advocates, particularly in training prosecutors and law enforcement officers. "Your Honors," Palmer began, "as someone who once prioritized conviction rates over justice, I can attest to the transformative impact of the Jenkins Protocol on legal professionals. When we're required to explain our actions in terms children can understand, we're forced to examine whether those actions are truly just." His testimony detailed how simplified explanation requirements had exposed problematic patterns in charging decisions, plea agreements, and sentencing recommendations, patterns that disproportionately affected families of color and those with limited resources. "The protocol doesn't just help children understand the system," Palmer concluded. "It helps the system understand itself and where it's falling short of its highest ideals." As the proceedings continued, Tiana observed her daughter taking careful notes, occasionally consulting with the peer advocates seated nearby. The team had expanded significantly, now including children from diverse backgrounds and experiences: foster youth, children of incarcerated parents, immigrant families navigating asylum processes, and those with disabilities requiring special accommodations in court. Each young advocate brought unique insights to the program, ensuring that the materials and methods developed were truly accessible to all children, not just those with educational privileges or family support. This inclusive approach had been Zara's insistence from the beginning, a recognition that her own experience represented just one perspective among many. When the court adjourned for deliberation, the initiative team gathered in an anteroom to debrief. Martinez, who now directed the legal support division of what had become a formal nonprofit organization, reviewed key points from the testimony. The justices seemed particularly impressed by the assessment data. Quantifying the impact has made a significant difference in how the program is perceived. Tiana nodded agreement. 3 years ago, we were seen as a heartwarming human interest story. Today, we're recognized as an evidence-based intervention with measurable outcomes. This evolution reflected Tiana's influence on the initiative's development. Her business background had brought strategic planning, financial sustainability, and professional operations to what might have otherwise remained a well-intentioned but limited community program. Under her leadership, the Jenkins Family Initiative had secured grant funding, established partnerships with major universities and legal associations, and developed a comprehensive training program for court personnel. As the adults discussed logistics, Zara huddled with her peer advocates, reviewing their observations from the proceedings. 12-year-old Miguel, whose family had successfully navigated the asylum process with help from the initiative, pointed out a key moment in the questioning. "Did you notice how Justice Chen kept asking about translation services? I think he's concerned about implementation in multilingual communities." Keisha, now 13, and a veteran of the program, agreed. "We should emphasize our materials are already available in 6 languages, and maybe mention the visual guides we developed for non-readers." Their analysis was interrupted by the arrival of Justice Coleman, who had slipped away from her colleagues to check on the team before final deliberations. "You were magnificent," she told Zara quietly. "The court has rarely seen such a compelling integration of personal experience and data-driven recommendations." Zara accepted the praise with characteristic humility. "I was nervous about the statistical questions,
Math isn't my strongest subject. Justice Coleman smiled. Which is precisely why you've built such an effective team. You understand the power of diverse strengths working together. She glanced at her watch. I should return before they send out a search party. The vote should conclude within the hour. As she departed, Tiana approached her daughter. How are you feeling, sweetheart? It's been an intense morning. Zara considered the question seriously. Good, I think. No matter what they decide, we've already helped a lot of families. This perspective, focusing on existing impact rather than future recognition, had become characteristic of Zara's approach. While the initiative's growth had brought increased visibility, she remained grounded in the fundamental purpose, helping children understand and navigate systems that affected their lives. When the court reconvened, the tension in the chamber was palpable. Chief Justice Williams' expression revealed nothing as he prepared to deliver the ruling. In the matter of standardized protocols for juvenile and family court proceedings, he began formally, this court has reached a unanimous decision. The gallery held its collective breath. The Jenkins Protocol for Child-Centered Court Communications is hereby adopted as mandatory procedure in all state courts handling juvenile and family matters, effective within 120 days. The announcement triggered restrained applause, quickly silenced by the Chief Justice's raised hand. Furthermore, he continued, this court establishes a permanent Youth Advisory Council to monitor implementation and recommend ongoing improvements to judicial communications affecting minors. Ms. Jenkins, the court would be honored if you would serve as the inaugural chairperson of this council. The request, essentially establishing Zara's role in shaping judicial policy, represented institutional recognition at the highest level. Tiana glanced at her daughter, searching for signs of overwhelm, but found only thoughtful consideration. Thank you, Your Honor. I'd be happy to serve, but I believe the chairperson role should rotate among youth members to ensure diverse perspectives. I would respectfully request being just one member of a leadership team. The response, declining personal recognition in favor of broader representation, prompted a rare smile from the Chief Justice. A wise recommendation, the court amends its request accordingly. As the session formally concluded, reporters gathered in the hallway outside, eager to capture reactions to the landmark decision. Justice Coleman masterfully managed the media interactions, ensuring that several peer advocates were interviewed alongside Zara, and that the focus remained on the protocol's impact rather than personal narratives. This isn't about one child's remarkable story. It's about transforming how our courts communicate with all children. The true success will be when such communication is so routine that it no longer makes headlines. Later that afternoon, as the team celebrated with ice cream in a park near the courthouse, Palmer approached Tiana with an expression of quiet amazement. When you first agreed to let me participate in this initiative, I never imagined we'd reach this point. A statewide mandate is beyond what any of us thought was possible. Tiana watched Zara and her friends playing an impromptu soccer game with some of the peer advocates, temporarily setting aside their historic accomplishment to simply be children enjoying a beautiful day. I think that's been the pattern from the beginning. Zara sees possibilities where others see limitations. She doesn't recognize impossible as a relevant category. Palmer nodded thoughtfully. I've been thinking a lot about that first courtroom scene. How differently things might have unfolded if I'd simply taken the time to verify the loan guidelines before pressing charges. Or if the guidelines had been written clearly enough for an average person to understand without legal training, Tiana added. Exactly. The problems in our system are deeply interconnected. What looks like individual misconduct is often a symptom of structural issues. Palmer hesitated before adding, working with this initiative has been the most meaningful rehabilitation I could have experienced. It's allowed me to transform my mistakes into something constructive. Across the park, Justice Coleman had joined the children's game, Her judicial robes were replaced by casual attire that few would associate with the distinguished jurist. Her mentorship of Zara had evolved into genuine affection for all the youth advocates, many of whom came from backgrounds with limited access to professional role models. Martinez approached with a tablet displaying early media coverage of the court's decision. "The national legal journals are already picking up the story," she reported. "The American Bar Association wants to feature the protocol in their next publication on judicial reform." What had begun as a local initiative was now poised to influence legal practices beyond state boundaries. Similar programs had already emerged in neighboring states, inspired by the Jenkins model but adapted to local conditions and needs. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the park, Tiana gathered the team for a final reflection before they dispersed. The circle included legal professionals, court administrators, student advocates, and family members, a diverse coalition united by commitment to a more accessible justice system. "Before we head home, I'd like us to share one hope for the future of this work," she suggested. "Something you'd like to see grow from today's decision." The responses revealed the initiative's expanding vision: integrated curriculum in law schools, teaching future attorneys to communicate effectively with children; trauma-informed court procedures, recognizing the emotional impact of legal proceedings on families; multilingual resources, ensuring equal access regardless of language barriers; and specialized approaches for children with different learning needs or disabilities. When the circle reached Zara, she considered her response carefully. "My hope is that someday, children won't need special protocols or advocates to understand what's happening in their families. That clear communication will just be normal in courts, the way it's becoming normal in hospitals and schools." The simplicity and fundamental wisdom of this hope resonated deeply. At its core, the initiative wasn't about creating special accommodations, but about transforming baseline expectations, establishing clarity, accessibility, and respect as fundamental standards rather than exceptional practices. That evening, as Tiana tucked Zara into bed, a ritual they maintained despite her growing independence, she noticed a new photograph her daughter had placed on her nightstand. It showed not the Supreme Court ceremony or media interviews, but the impromptu soccer game in the park, children laughing together, temporarily free from the weight of systems and protocols and historic decisions. "That was my favorite part of today," Zara explained, following her mother's gaze. "Just being regular kids for a while." Tiana smoothed her hair gently. "You know, that's always been the goal. Making sure you have space to be a regular kid alongside all the extraordinary work you do." "I know," Zara yawned, the day's excitement finally giving way to exhaustion. "Justice Coleman says balance isn't something you achieve once and keep forever. It's something you have to keep working on every day." "She's a wise woman," Tiana agreed, "though I suspect she learned that lesson from you as much as you learned it from her." As Zara drifted toward sleep, Tiana reflected on their remarkable journey. What had begun in fear and desperation, a child frantically researching legal procedures to save her mother from wrongful prosecution, had transformed into a movement that was literally changing how justice functioned for thousands of families. The true miracle wasn't that Zara had demonstrated extraordinary capabilities at 8 years old, though her intelligence was undeniable. The miracle was that a system built by adults, for adults, operating according to adult logic and priorities, had actually listened to a child's perspective and recognized its inherent wisdom. The next morning, as they prepared for school and work, returning to the ordinary routines that anchored their extraordinary lives, Tiana found Zara already at the kitchen table, sketching ideas for the Youth Advisory Council structure. "I think we need representation from at least 5 different age groups, and definitely members with experience in different types of cases: foster care, divorce, juvenile justice, immigration."
Tiana marveled at her daughter's natural systems thinking, her intuitive understanding of how different components needed to interact for optimal functioning. This capacity, present even in her earliest courtroom intervention, had matured through experience and education into something truly exceptional. "Have you thought about your own role?" she asked, placing breakfast beside Zara's diagrams. Now that the protocol is officially adopted, you could step back if you wanted to, focus more on school, friends, other interests. Zara considered this possibility seriously. At 11, her world had expanded significantly beyond the initiative that had defined much of her recent life. She had discovered new passions in science, music, and creative writing. Her soccer team had advanced to regional championships. Normal childhood was flourishing alongside her exceptional contributions. I think I want to stay involved, but differently, she decided. Maybe mentoring newer advocates instead of always being the one talking to judges and lawyers. And definitely spending more time developing materials for younger kids, like 5- and 6-year-olds who can't read yet. This evolution, from direct advocacy to capacity building, reflected Zara's growing understanding of sustainable change. Rather than remaining the singular face of the initiative, she was helping to create systems that would continue functioning effectively without depending on any individual's extraordinary efforts. 1 month later, the Youth Advisory Council held its inaugural meeting in a conference room at the State Judicial Center. 15 young advocates, ranging in age from 7 to 17, gathered around a circular table designed to eliminate hierarchical positioning. Adult advisors, including Justice Coleman and Richard Palmer, sat in an outer circle, available for consultation but intentionally positioned as supporters rather than leaders. Zara, serving as one of 3 co-chairs selected by the youth members, called the meeting to order with a gentle tap of a small gavel, a gift from Judge Simmons commemorating the council's formation. "Welcome to our first official meeting," she began, her voice carrying the quiet confidence that had become her hallmark. "Today we'll be reviewing the implementation timeline for the Jenkins Protocol and identifying priorities for our oversight role." The discussion that followed demonstrated the extraordinary capacity of young people to engage with complex systems when given appropriate frameworks and genuine respect. 7-year-old Tyler, the youngest council member, offered insights about pictographic instructions that had eluded adult designers. 17-year-old Amara, who had navigated both foster care and juvenile justice systems, identified critical gaps in transition protocols between different types of proceedings. From her position in the outer circle, Tiana observed with quiet pride as Zara facilitated the conversation, drawing out quieter voices, synthesizing diverse perspectives, and guiding the group toward concrete recommendations. The skills she had developed through the initiative had applications far beyond legal advocacy. She was becoming a natural leader in whatever context she entered. As the council adjourned its first session, Chief Justice Williams made an unexpected appearance. The members stood respectfully as he entered, his formal robes a stark contrast to their casual attire. "Please, be seated," he requested, taking an empty chair in the outer circle, a symbolic acknowledgement of the council's authority in this space. "I wanted to observe briefly and offer my appreciation for your commitment to this important work." The formidable jurist, known for his exacting standards and limited patience, surveyed the young faces around the table with unexpected warmth. "When I first heard about the Jenkins Protocol 3 years ago, I was skeptical that children could meaningfully contribute to judicial reform. Today, I count that skepticism among my most significant professional misjudgments." His candor created a ripple of surprise among both youth members and adult advisors. Chief Justices rarely acknowledge errors of any kind, let alone publicly. "You have taught the judiciary a profound lesson, that justice is not truly justice unless it can be understood by everyone it affects, especially the most vulnerable among us." He focused briefly on Zara.
Miss Jenkins, your initial courage in challenging adult systems has created space for all these voices to be heard. I believe that may ultimately be your most significant contribution. The observation carried weight, coming from the state's highest judicial authority,
A recognition that Zara's legacy wasn't the protocol bearing her name, but the fundamental shift in whose perspectives were valued in shaping justice systems. As the Chief Justice departed, the council members gathered their materials and prepared to return to their ordinary lives, to homework and chores and soccer practice and family dinners. The duality that characterized Zara's existence had become a shared reality for these young advocates. They were simultaneously ordinary children and architects of institutional change. Outside the Judicial Center, Martinez waited to drive several council members home. As they loaded into her minivan, transitioning instantly from formal advisors to giggling kids arguing about radio stations, she caught Tiana's eye with a knowing smile. Who would have thought, she mused, that a desperate mother-daughter research project would lead to all this? Tiana watched as Zara joined the playful backseat debate, momentarily free from the weight of protocols and systems change. I'm just grateful she still remembers how to be 11 amid all of this. That's been your real achievement, Martinez observed, protecting her childhood while nurturing her extraordinary capabilities. Many parents of exceptional children struggle with that balance. The insight resonated deeply. Throughout their journey, Tiana had remained vigilant against the forces that would have accelerated Zara's development or exploited her abilities. She had created boundaries around media exposure, declined lucrative book deals and speaking engagements, and consistently prioritized ordinary childhood experiences alongside exceptional opportunities. As a result, Zara had developed not just remarkable intellectual and leadership capabilities, but also the emotional intelligence, social skills, and simple joy that constituted a healthy childhood. She had friends who knew nothing about protocols and court systems, hobbies that had nothing to do with legal advocacy, and space to discover her own evolving identity separate from public perceptions. That evening, as they arrived home, Zara received an email that brought their journey full circle. Judge Eleanor Simmons, who had presided over that first courtroom encounter 3 years earlier, was retiring from the bench and had a special request. Dear Zara, as I prepare to conclude my judicial service, I find myself reflecting on cases that have remained meaningful throughout my career. Your courtroom appearance stands among the most significant, not because of its legal complexity, but because it fundamentally changed how I understand my responsibilities to families in my courtroom. I am establishing a scholarship fund for children interested in legal advocacy, and I would be honored if you would serve on the selection committee. The Jenkins Scholarship will support young people who demonstrate your remarkable combination of intellectual clarity and compassionate understanding. Your influence has extended far beyond what anyone might have imagined that day in my courtroom. You have reminded an entire legal system that its purpose is not procedure for procedure's sake, but justice that can be understood by all it serves, especially its children. As Zara read the message aloud, Tiana felt the completion of a circle that had begun in fear and desperation, but was concluding in recognition and lasting change. The terrified child in the yellow dress had not only saved her mother from wrongful prosecution, but had transformed how an entire system functioned for countless families who would never know her name. "What do you think, sweetheart?" she asked as Zara finished reading. "Would you like to be part of the scholarship committee?" Zara considered the question with characteristic thoughtfulness. "Yes, I think so. It would be nice to help other kids who want to make things better." She closed her tablet and stretched. "But first, can we make popcorn and watch that new science documentary?"
The one about deep-sea creatures? Tiana laughed, grateful for this perfect embodiment of their balanced life, moving seamlessly from judicial scholarship committees to popcorn and nature documentaries. Absolutely. You get the bowls, I'll start the popcorn. As they settled onto the couch together, the extraordinary and ordinary aspect of their lives coexisting in perfect harmony, Tiana reflected on the journey that had brought them here. What had begun as one child's desperate attempt to save her mother had evolved into a movement that was literally changing how justice functioned across an entire state and potentially beyond. But the true miracle wasn't in the protocols or committees or official recognitions. It was in the fact that Zara remained fundamentally herself, curious, compassionate, and still very much a child, despite the adult systems she had helped to transform. As the documentary began, Zara nestled against her mother's side, temporarily setting aside courtrooms and committees to marvel at bioluminescent creatures in the ocean depths. In that moment of simple connection, Tiana recognized the most profound lesson of their extraordinary journey: that true justice, like true wisdom, begins with maintaining the capacity for wonder in a world that too often forgets how to see through a child's eyes. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.